Hi everyone, I'd like to welcome you to the first episode of our new video series. My name is Mike McGinley. I'm the General Manager of the Hospitality Lending Team here at Live Oak Bank. The first episode of our video series is going to be focused on appraisals. Appraisals are very important to the hospitality industry. Developers are looking at appraisals to determine the feasibility of a project before they enter it and put in their equity. With me today are Evan and Dan from LW Hospitality Advisors. Welcome, Dan. Welcome, Evan.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
The first question I'd like to ask is to Evan. What is the objective of an appraisal?
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having us. The objective of an appraisal essentially is to assist in the determination of market value. At the end of the day, an appraisal is an opinion of market value, which is determined by market forces, specifics, operational issues in the market, site's location, and many other things that are happening around a given piece of land or a property.
Dan, Evan was talking about market participants and for folks entering into a project. What are the top three things that make a project feasible?
I think you first have to define feasibility, and typically it is economic feasibility that folks are looking at. Value upon completion and or stabilization being at a minimum equal to, but more likely greater than, cost to develop.
Evan, how is a cap rate applied to an appraisal, and how does that factor into what the actual appraised value is?
What is a cap rate, right? So a capitalization rate essentially is the determination of value based upon 1 year of sort of stabilized income, utilizing a market rate of return and capitalizing that net operating income, that income line into value. In the hotel space, the way that typical investors, especially of investment grade assets, they don't really buy or sell based upon capitalization rates because the hotel business is very different from other forms of real estate. Hotels constantly fluctuate in their income because hotels literally are leased up on a night-by-night basis, and you can change the rates on a nanosecond by nanosecond basis, especially with technology the way it is today. And so with hotels, we typically utilize a discounted cash flow analysis. And again, as appraisers, because we reflect the market, that is what investors typically do. And so that is what the methodology that we pursue. Discounted cash flow analysis would incorporate a discount rate as well as a terminal rate, which essentially is a cap rate after a certain hold period in the hotel space, typically somewhere between 5 and 10 years.
Dan, if I'm a developer and I'm coming to you folks for an appraisal, or a bank for that matter, what kind of information do I have to have in hand when I bring it to you folks for an appraisal?
At a minimum, we clearly need some sort of a legal description of the property. We also need some information about who owns the asset in terms of the land, whether it has sold in the recent past, and if so, what the terms of that transaction were, or if there's a contract for sale, what the terms of that transaction are going to be. And depending upon what our mandate is, many developers and or lenders will come to us with a project that is already fully planned out. Hasn't started construction yet, but fully planned out. And we're tasked with either doing a feasibility analysis and or an appraisal. On many other occasions, we are asked to perform a highest and best use analysis to figure out, well, first of all, does a hotel economically make sense? And then if so, what type of hotel?
Evan, how do you research and determine value for hotels in secondary and tertiary markets, especially if there aren't a lot of comps in that area?
When you're in a larger market with available data, available information, Smith Travel Research, one of the foremost information sources in the hotel space, you can order a competitive set analysis, a trend report that shows you average rates and occupancies for a specific competitive set of hotels. But if you're in a secondary, or really secondary markets are typically pretty fluid in that there's information available. In the tertiary markets, it becomes tougher. If you want to build a limited service branded hotel, and there aren't any in that market, where is the demand coming from? So why isn't there any other supply? So there it becomes, to your point, a little bit more challenging. And there we typically send someone to spend several days in that market. We really strive to understand what is this market? what would create demand for hotels? Is there demand for hotels that are going to other markets, that maybe are 10 or 20 miles away, right? Because in most tertiary markets, 10 or 20 miles is only 10 or 20-minute drive.
Going along those lines with having a specialty in lodging, how do you navigate an appraisal through an economic cycle?
If there are true headwinds in the space, if you see that supply is growing at 6% as opposed to a long-term average of 2% in a specific market, et cetera, that all gets taken into account into our analysis. We utilize sophisticated proprietary models in our practice. Again, as Dan mentioned, we're focused exclusively on hospitality and gaming type properties. And so we have a significant amount of data. We have data from prior downturns. While we do look at a specific point in time, we also do look to the future to the best that anyone can, which is why we also believe that hotels never truly stabilize, right? And the fluctuation, as we keep mentioning, hotels can literally change on a dime. If you have a fully leased office building on September 10th, and then God forbid you have September 11th, September 12th, your fully leased office building is still fully leased. With hotels, you could have 100% occupancy on the 10th and 0% literally on the 12th, which is what happened in New York. The occupancy, I think, from September 12th to the end of the year was something around 25-30% in a market that normally operates above 90 at that time of year. And so I think additionally, the only time in my career in the last 15 years that I've ever projected a downturn in any sort of economics was at the end of 2008, projecting for 2009 after the failure of the banking system, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, et cetera. So that was the one time. But again, it was because that is what his investors were projecting at that moment in time. And Dan's got a few more years in the space than I do, and I would ask, how many times in your career have you ever projected a decline in economics?
Maybe once or twice, similar to what you described. And I don't know what you were insinuating there. I'm only 29 years old, but that's okay. I dye my hair gray.
There was no insinuation at all.
Great, thank you guys.
We hope you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the widget below.